We're going to begin with Barbara Shigog, who is owner of Bass Capital Management. She's a CDFA and is the first person you should speak with. So go ahead, Barb.
Thanks, Robin. As Robin said, my name is Barb Shigog. I am a divorce financial planner, and my role as a CDFA, so Certified Divorce Financial Analyst, as well as a CPA, is I assist clients pre, during, and post. So I like to start with pre, but I enter wherever people need my help. So I'm going to cover the financial side, 2 of the mistakes. And the finances we're going to start with because they really is that's when it starts to become real, and it can be overwhelming. But we're here to tell you, you can do this. We don't let anyone apologize and say, oh, but I'm not familiar with everything. That's fine. That's normal. And that's typical. And I will emphasize that's why you have a team to support you every step of the way, because you are busy doing maybe everything related to the family, and maybe your partner is doing everything, all the bill paying and working full time. Whatever the breakdown is, we're here to support you in whatever way you need. So just to cover some of the financials, if you're thinking about divorce, maybe you want to kind of get ahead on it. What kind of information should I have in advance? Maybe while I can still get it. The finances, what we really look for are bank statements, tax returns, credit card statements, mortgage statements. So don't be overwhelmed. These are all easily obtained documents, especially tax returns. They're really easy to get. So again, mistake 1 is don't feel overwhelmed. You can do this, and don't apologize because you're not the bill payer and you don't feel like you're the most familiar. You have a team that can help you accumulate all the information. And then the other second mistake I will say is sometimes there are overlooked items or unintended consequences. So for example, retirement assets, you get them and they could be tax deferred. So what do I mean by that? If when you eventually take money out of that account, you'll have to pay taxes on that. So that may or may not have the same equivalence of a cash account. So sometimes we adjust it. Sometimes people, if they're younger, maybe they prefer to have a tax deferred account, but that's something that we encourage people to think about. We also want people to think about any capital gains they may have in an investment account. That also could have some tax consequences. And of course, the sale of your house. If, for example, you take over the house, you're now in a few years going to own 100% of what could be a very sizable gain, and you'll have to pay taxes on that. So those are some of the things we want you to think about from a tax perspective. Also, things that aren't typically disclosed by your partner. And these could be things like stock options or unvested options. Sometimes we have to dig a little bit deeper for those, but we always encourage people to, think about and get the benefits plan. So what I say is a mistake we want to avoid is let's make sure we capture everything and we know the consequences of owning that asset. So I think we had one question. Where can I find a list of the information that I will need? And I can tell you that we'll put it out on our New Beginnings Facebook page, but you can also Google Rule 1.25A disclosure, and you'll see that New Hampshire has a list of documents that each party must disclose to each other. So that's always a a good place to start. So I hope this helps in having you avoid financial mistakes when it comes to divorce. I will now turn you over to Kate Morneau, who is a collaborative divorce attorney on our panel.
Thank you, Barb. First, welcome everybody. We're really excited that you could join us tonight. Each of us professionals have come up with two different mistakes that we've seen. So as a divorce attorney, the mistakes are countless. It was hard to pick two, but my goal for tonight is to make sure that you don't make these two, if nothing else. And I'm happy to answer questions too after. But the first one that I think of is people not getting legal advice right from the start. You can meet with an attorney for just 1 hour just to get a lay of the land. What are your rights? What are you entitled to under the law? There's all sorts of different things that people do. Your neighbor might have said, well, I got this. Your sister might have said, but what about this? I think you can get that. Really, our state in New Hampshire is really specific, and it's different from across the border in Massachusetts or Vermont, Maine. Every state's different. So just having that first meeting with an attorney to know what you're entitled to is really important. And people who don't make that, or people who make that mistake, it can really cost them a lot of money and a lot of pain down the road. Again, you don't have to spend all that money hiring a lawyer if you don't want to. Maybe just having that first meeting could set you up for success. The second mistake that I see is a little bit on the other end of it. So if you have worked out an agreement with your partner and you have it fully drafted, you think everything's perfect, not having it reviewed by a lawyer before it gets submitted to the court is a big mistake. I think a lawyer, again, you don't have to pay a lawyer thousands of dollars to review your documents. A lot of lawyers will just meet with you for an hour. They'll spend another couple hours reviewing your agreement, make sure all of the boxes are checked correctly. Everything that you're entitled to has been written clearly so that you know moving forward, you're not going to have any disputes as to what does this actually mean. I thought it meant this, someone else thought it meant that. So really just having that clarification from a lawyer, that stamp of approval that yes, this will be approved, no problem, is a really helpful thing. And knowing our judges. So each of our judges in the state will do something different. I know one judge who will not approve something that another judge would. So having that meeting just to make sure you've taken care of all the pieces is really important. I am a collaborative divorce attorney and a mediator. My firm is in Nashua, and I'd be happy again to answer any questions.
Kate, we do have one question, which is, they wanted to know if alimony is standard in New Hampshire.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yes, New Hampshire has alimony, and we have a formula that the law, puts in place to calculate alimony. So it's not necessarily standard. Not everyone gets alimony. You first have to have a need for alimony, which means you can't meet your normal budget with your income and child support if you're getting that. And then the other person has to have the ability to pay it. So if they have extra money left over at the end of the month, they've met all their budget needs, then we've got a situation where alimony can be discussed. And the length of alimony is usually half the length of the marriage. So again, if this is a long-term marriage, you're going to get it for longer, a short-term marriage, shorter. So really good question. I see one more question. I've heard of mediation, but are there other processes? So as I mentioned, I am a collaborative divorce attorney too. Most people haven't heard of the collaborative process, but that's, you bring in professionals. So trained lawyers in the collaborative process. You get a financial neutral who comes in and helps in a way that really no one else could do that. This is somebody who's not for one side or the other. They're looking at all the financials. And then you get a coach who is a mental health trained worker. So they help facilitate it. This is completely private and outside of the court process. At the end, hopefully you sign an agreement and it all gets filed with the court. So there's way more ways to go through the process of divorce than just mediation. So thanks for the question. I'm going to introduce you to Laura Gamache of Gamache Realty. She is your go-to for your real estate needs. If you have a home, you're going to want to talk to Laura.
Thank you, Kate. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're just super excited to have this resource group for you all, and just to be your support group. When it comes to the real estate side of things and the sale of the home, of course, can be a very emotional, right? So, of course, to us, if we're, dealing with the children and whatnot, not always are we aware of the mortgage and et cetera. So that's really where I come in to really be helpful, kind of like a twofold of my first kind of mistake that I see is not knowing how much your home is worth, and then also not knowing exactly how much equity you have in your home. So especially when you're starting to have the discussion with your partner in regards to, kind of being who gets X amount of funds, just really knowing how much your home is worth is a really huge step that a lot of people really kind of bypass and think that they can just either figure it out themselves or kind of just go to some online resources like Zillow. My home says this, so, and not always is that accurate. It could be worth a lot more and you have a lot of money that's sitting on the table. So really having that conversation with the real estate agent evolving around the home, depending on what's going to be happening, right? Are you going to be someone going to be keeping the home, or and kind of in terms for someone's going to be residing or looking to needing to find other housing. So really just knowing that information up front would really just go a long way in the end. So you really can making sure that you are making the best financial decisions and getting your share of that equity that you do own in your home. The next would also be for the future, right? Lining up. So if you're not going to be residing in the home and a partner buying out of there is looking for that housing for next lining up, right? And in this type of market where it's a very still seller's market, fast pace, a lot of the times the questions that I'm getting asked are, when should I reach out to my real estate agent? And I always say yesterday. So because a lot of times we need to be starting that process of looking for something for you to go to while we're getting the home ready for the market, and also bringing me in, because a lot of times if we need to do things to the home, right? Sometimes if one partner's been in the home and the other hasn't, there might be some things that we might need to focus on to really get that house ready for top market value. And then it's that discussion of really keeping that communications well between each partner, because there might be someone that might need to pay for some items, right? So we want to make sure that that's very clear of who's going to be covering those costs. Are they going to be, something that the attorneys will tack on at the end and will be split with the amongst the proceeds? So just a lot of questions that come up around that, where I really help facilitate that and those conversations. So it's not you said we need to do this. It's a professional that's coming in and really kind of giving their overall professional opinion of things we need to focus on to get that home ready for the market, to make sure we meet our goals, whether it's the timeline that we're looking to do, whether it's the top value, top number price that you guys are really trying to hit. So all sorts of different, circumstances that we could be focusing on. So those are a lot of items that I really kind of see that a lot of people, unfortunately, don't get those ahead of time, and the house is on the market and now they don't really have anywhere lined up to go. So again, just kind of having those conversations and me being helpful to kind of see where you're looking to go. Are you really looking for a rental? Are we looking for a purchase? Because in this market, it's really can be challenging to have a home sale contingency. So again, having that conversation up front and ahead of time, so you don't get in a position that anyone could be really just stuck if it does come down to having to need to sell the house. And also, just to kind of segue into our next panelist, sometimes I'm coming in and if it just doesn't make sense for the, or the agreement isn't to sell and a partner will be buying out the other partner, and that just is the best situation for you and your partner, then the next kind of segue would be kind of speaking with a mortgage lender. So I saw that question too in terms of come up, sir, for when should I contact real estate agent? And like I mentioned before, it would just be, it needs to be right away, just because of just the market that we're still experiencing here in New Hampshire. And we're not really forecasting too much of a change in our market here. Probably for next at least a year or so. So kind of thinking long term that we're probably going to be in this type of market for definitely throughout this year and throughout the end of next year is will be the soonest that they're saying any change of interest rates. And so your next panelist that will be a great person to chat with after that, I'll introduce, will be Renee Coleman. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Laura. Hi, everybody. My name is Renee Coleman. I am a residential mortgage lender, and I'm also a CDLP, which is a certified divorce lending professional. So this is what I do. I work in the divorce field, working with borrowers and helping them through their process. So there seems to be a theme with all of us. I heard Kate mention it, I heard Barb mention it, and Laura talk to us early. So that is my first mistake that I see. What we don't want to happen is a borrower comes to me after their divorce settlement is done, and they have their signed divorce agreement, and they've told me I was awarded the home and I'm going to buy out my spouse, and we put the numbers together for your refinance and the numbers don't work. You don't qualify for that mortgage. I've seen it far too many times, and it's heartbreaking. It doesn't cost anything to talk to me, and you want to talk to me right away. What we will do is build a loan for you. We don't know any of the numbers yet, but that's okay. We want to see what the numbers look like today. What's the current mortgage? What's your current income? What's your current credit look like? So that we can be prepared, right? So when you're going to your attorney or your mediator, and perhaps the outcome you're looking for is, I want to keep the house. And I hear this often, I want to keep the house. And we want to know, what does that picture look like today? And then what does it look like should you have to refinance the property? So there's all different scenarios, right? We have the title to the property and we have the mortgage. And you and your spouse, it can be one or both of you on either of those. And we've seen every situation, right? So if both of your names or just your spouse's name is on the mortgage and you've been awarded the house, likely the departing spouse isn't going to want their name on the mortgage anymore. And there's only two ways, or I shouldn't say that, three ways to take a departing spouse off of the mortgage. You can sell the house, right? The lien gets paid off and now that person is removed. That mortgage is gone. The other way you can do it is an assumption, a mortgage assumption. And we can talk about that in a minute. The third way is a refinance. So even though the divorce court says you've been awarded the house and you're responsible for all of the payments, that doesn't negate your original contract with the mortgage lender. You're both responsible. If you're both on mortgage, you're both responsible for that payment. So even though the judge says now you're responsible for the payment, if you don't make a payment, it's still going to affect your spouse's credit. So again, we want to talk to a lender early on, right? We'll know enough into the process if you are going to be wanting to keep the home, and if you know what your income looks like, and if there's going to be a buyout. So we talked about buying the spouse out. So when you go through the divorce process and you have the division of assets, right? Your house, you likely have some equity in your house, and that's an asset that is split, however that split is. And so there may be a sum of money owed to the departing spouse. Well, if we have a mortgage application for you early, I'll be able to tell you how much equity can I take out for a potential buyout to the spouse, right? If you're negotiating with your attorney saying, you know, there's X amount of dollars in equity that we will pay out to the departing spouse, but I put the numbers together and say you can't borrow that much, excuse me, that we want to rework the numbers, or there needs to be another avenue to buy out the spouse outside the mortgage. So that might mean there's some cash available. That might mean there's some retirement accounts available. So that's the first mistake that I see often. You want to talk to your lender sooner than later. Let's get an application built so we can play around with the numbers. We can play around with scenarios. If we know there's going to be some alimony and some child support, we maybe have some rough numbers. We can plug all that in. Which leads me to my second mistake. Most people don't realize that you can use alimony and child support as income to qualify for a mortgage. So there are some rules around it, depending which mortgage program we go with. But again, we want to know that up front, right? And as you're working with your attorney or your mediator, you will know if there's going to be. You may not know the exact number, but we'll have a rough idea. And again, we can plug those numbers into the scenario. So a lot of women will come to me and say, "Oh, I can never afford the house. I don't have income." Well, they're actually forgetting that child support and alimony is income. So we can use it. Again, there's some rules around it. So you want to talk to a lender to make sure, when the time comes for you to receive that support, that it's being received correctly, that a lender would be able to use it. So those are the two big mistakes that I see. So I wanted to mention the assumption. That's a big one. In today's market, interest rates are so high and it's so tough. And we have borrowers that want to keep the house and they want to buy their spouse out, but that requires the refinance. The other option is something called an assumption. An assumption is something where your existing mortgage lender would allow you to take over the mortgage, to assume the mortgage and remove your spouse from that mortgage. Now, most lenders, that's going to require you to qualify. So it will be like starting a brand new mortgage. They're going to need all your income documents, your credit, excuse me, to determine if you alone are qualified for that mortgage. And so let's say there's 22 years left on your mortgage and you're at a 3% interest rate. An assumption would allow you to keep that same term and keep that same interest rate. It won't allow you to take any cash out should there be the need for a buyout, but at least you could keep the mortgage and, more importantly, the interest rate as is. So that's called a mortgage assumption. Most VA loans and most FHA loans are assumable. Conventional loans, a little bit harder. They're getting a little bit better about it. There are some things you'll want to know. So when you're talking to your lender, ask them how you can get the information to find out if your mortgage is assumable. Again, you can't get any cash out, but it would allow the departing spouse to be removed from the existing mortgage and all the terms of the mortgage would stay the same. Now, there's some different rules, depending on the lender, but that is a thing to assume a mortgage. And we get that question a lot these days because it's really hard. If you're at a 3% interest rate and now you're going to be at a 7% interest rate, that could be the difference between qualifying for the mortgage or not. That said, even if I tell you that you qualify for this mortgage, it may not be the right thing for you. And the reason I say that is because of your finances. So our next panelist, excuse me. Our next panelist is Robin Young with North Star, and she's going to talk a little bit about the financial side of things.
Bless you, Renee.
I was pollen.
Yes, terrible right now. Yes, so thank you so much. Robin Young, I'm a president of North Star Financial Planning, and we specialize in helping women post-divorce. So, you've spent all this time working through the process with these wonderful ladies, and you have your finalized legal agreement, and now it's time to create life on your own, personally and financially. And so, we help our clients with that because it's both an emotional time, sort of recreating your life, and a financial time. And we kind of combine those two for our clients. So one of the top mistakes that I see, so we're going to talk about two, is putting your divorce decree in a drawer once the divorce is legally finalized. And the problem with that is that so much of your financial future is based in what's listed in that decree. So you may be very tempted after that long ordeal to do that, but we would work with you, or you could go through it. We have checklists that we could send you about the things that you would need to think about as you're going through your divorce decree, like how long does my alimony and child support last? If you're Social Security age, there's all sorts of rules around, maximizing that for yourself, and getting records of your ex-spouse's Social Security would be really important. Often, as Renee was talking about, there's conditions around mortgages and how property is divided. And so knowing what you have to do, I had one client who had to pay off her mortgage by a certain date to take title to a property with some of the proceeds she got from the divorce. So there's all sorts of timelines inside your divorce decree that you would need to abide by. And then there are all sorts of assets that might be coming to you that you need to retitle. So if it's a 401k or some sort of retirement plan, pension, typically there's a quadro, which is a legal document that needs to be filed and then submitted to the employer to get your assets in your name, so pulled into an IRA. There's also, if it's a joint account, there would need to be retitling, putting assets in your name, beneficiary designation changes on life insurance policies, company benefit plans. So there's a long list of things that need to happen when the divorce is legally finalized to get your financial house in order. So I imagine for a lot of you that can be a very overwhelming thing, especially if you haven't been the one to take care of the finances in the past. So I would highly encourage you to get some help, from a qualified advisor who can walk you through those steps, because you don't have to do it alone, right? You just want to find the right support with that. So the second one is not understanding your new financial reality. So Renee also talked about getting, house proceeds, right? And we often get the question of, I have all of these resources and how should I put them to work, whether it's be investing, whether it be to buy a property, to, pay for kids' college. There's lots of competing goals as you sort of enter into this next stage of life and, your own retirement and financial security. And so understanding all of your resources with a financial plan of some sort, where you understand your net worth statement, which is basically your assets and liabilities, when you understand your cash flow, what's coming in, what's going out, that will help you make longer term decisions. But sort of entwined with that is the emotional side. Part of our process and working with clients is helping them really slow down a little bit. You don't have to make decisions on everything all at once, and giving yourself space to figure out, what you want your life to look like. How you feel today may not be how you feel in 5 years or 10 years or even next year. So giving yourself permission to take care of yourself, take care of your family, and kind of figure out what you want is also part of the financial planning process and your goals process. So if you need any resources in terms of lists, or want to just kind of talk about your particular situation, please reach out on that. So those are my top two. And I think that we have been encouraging questions. So I think we have a question here that I think this is for for Kate, actually. But if any other questions that you guys have on anything that we've talked about tonight, or anything we haven't talked about that you feel would be helpful, we're happy to spend our remaining time doing that. But the question is, I have been at home for the last 10 years with my husband, 100% supporting everything. How do they determine what support I get after divorce?
Yeah, that's a great question, and not an uncommon situation where there's been one person who's been kind of the breadwinner and one person who's been caring for the home. So in New Hampshire, the courts will do the alimony calculation, and that's in part due to your contributions to the relationship and the family. So if you've not been working, then they will look at what capacity you can get back to work in. You can, if you need some training, things like that will come into play. But they will do a formula based on your need and your husband's ability to pay. So usually it's 23% of the difference of your two incomes, or your need, whichever is lower. So for example, let's say at the end of the month, you need $2,000 to pay your bills. If that is less than 23% of the difference between his income, your income, then that's the amount that you would get. And that's, again, assuming that he has enough income to support himself as well. So good question. It's a little more complicated than I'm saying now. Lots of nuances go into it. Again, if there's child support, that comes into play. There's other things that come in as far as, let's think, health insurance. So if he's providing you health insurance post-divorce, that can come into that calculation as well for alimony. Good question.
Let's see if we have another one here. Yes, we have one on the divorce process and where to start with that, and how to, the kind of the difference between collaborative and some of the other options out there.
I think I had addressed that one earlier. I don't know if that's the same question, but there's collaborative divorce, there's mediation. You don't need to have any formal process. You could sit down with all of the forms. All of the forms to get divorced are on the court's website. You could sit down at the kitchen table and go through them together and fill them all up together. So there's really no set way to do it, but there are lots of different resources. So good question.
Okay.
Robin, I see one for you. Do you see that one? I'm getting a settlement. How do I make decisions where those resources should go?
That yeah, so so that's really, so one of the first questions is, what's your cash flow? Where are you living currently? So proceeds from a house. So, is that person renting? Do they want to buy a house? What are the other resources that you have? So again, I think it goes back to doing a financial plan and understanding your new financial reality. And, that can be done on your own, or you can get help doing that depending on, your desire and skill in doing that. But housing decisions can be complicated. It's a huge investment, and it depends if you have other resources that you have to support your lifestyle. So it's kind of really looking at the cash flow component and the investment component, and a lot of the things that Renee talked about in terms of, if you are buying a house and need to take a mortgage out, what is your ability to get a mortgage, and going down that road. So, if you can pause, I think, again, sometimes giving yourself some space to answer some of those questions would be helpful, because absorbing your new financial reality does take time, and it's normal to feel overwhelmed and stressed, and giving yourself permission to, go around the rotary a bit, I think is super helpful in my experience in working with other divorcing women.
I see another question about, does it matter who files the petition for divorce? So it only matters as far as the clock starts ticking when the petition has been filed. And what I mean by that is you can ask for child support, you can ask for alimony, back to the date that somebody was served with a petition for divorce. So that would be a reason to file first, but it doesn't really matter the petitioner, the respondent, it doesn't matter who you are in the case. There's no one gets treated differently. You just get this case started if you're the petitioner. And that's the jurisdiction that's going to take your case. So if you live in different towns, wherever you live is where it's going to be filed. And sometimes that's a benefit to be in one court over the other. Another good reason to have a chat with a lawyer because it does make a difference. So good question. I saw another one. I don't know if it comes to me or to one of the financial people, but how do they take into account the value of veterans' health insurance benefits for a spouse who will lose those health benefits upon divorce? Or if they stayed married, he died, there would have been a health care for life.
Hi, I'll take that one. Sometimes the best answer is I can't give you a total answer because there's a little bit too much information that I need. So for example, how long you've been married, etc. So if you are going to get a survey after this call, after this webinar, and if you want to just type in that question, that might be a better question. I can get back to you with an answer more directly to you, if you feel comfortable.
Yeah, so we'll give another minute or two for any additional questions that you all might have. We really appreciate you joining us this evening for this topic. We are going to follow up with an email, as Barb mentioned, well, you'll get a survey right after this session, and then we'll send a follow-up email with our email addresses in case there's any additional questions that you may have that didn't come to you tonight. It's a lot of information and it's a long process. So, feel free to use us as a resource, which is our, entire goal of being here this evening. I don't know if anyone else would like to add anything.
I just see one more question that came in. How does determination of custody of children work? Is New Hampshire more in favor of mother having the child? In New Hampshire, it used to be that moms got, priority. It's not that way anymore. All of our judges are pretty equal. If it's up to a judge, they're going to split a parenting schedule pretty much down the middle. There's been studies that show kids do better when they're in both homes and have contact with both parents. So it's not necessarily going to be you're the mom, you get the kids. But with that being said, if you've been the primary caretaker and the other parent has been working a lot and they don't have the flexibility to have the kids half the time, that's when most likely you're going to get the kids more than half. But it's tough. It's tough. It's a huge change for you. It's a huge change for your children. And I always recommend getting the kids into therapy, or at least a wait list, because it takes forever to get kids into therapy, but get them on a wait list, even if they're like, I'm fine. It's really a good place to start because it's tough, Let's see. Next question. How many years of marriage is considered as serious or start impacting decisions? I don't really know what that question is asking. Do any of you on the panel?
I'm wondering
Say
if it's
10 years seems to be a magic number, but there's a lot of circumstances, but 10 and then 20, a long-term marriage is what would be considered really serious. But I've always kind of, as a general rule of thumb, used 10 years, but there's lots of different circumstances.
And then another question, how do you make sure you're not responsible for your spouse's new debts, liabilities, legal issues from driving with dementia if you are informally separated? You have to be officially divorced in order to not have that legal obligation. Yeah, unfortunately, this is something that has come up for me in the past, not quite a bit, but a few times, and it was really tough and really sad. And to be honest, I don't know any other way to separate yourself from the debt liabilities other than a divorce. And I know that's really hard to say. If you have a spouse that's going through, any type of mental health issue too, I think that's definitely worthy of chatting with a lawyer because there's not a lot of options, but there's some that will help you get protected. So I'm sorry that whoever wrote that, I'm sorry you're going through that, or someone who's going through that, because that's really hard.
Yeah, there's a question about if we only work in New Hampshire or other New England states as well. I know that both Barb and I can work anywhere in the US. And I don't know about you other ladies, so.
Yeah, I can do mortgages in any state.
I'm licensed in New Hampshire and Massachusetts, but I work with agents all over, so I have good referral partners in other states if needed.
And I personally just practice in New Hampshire, but I have a lawyer in my office that does Massachusetts as well.
Great.
Great question.
Yes, really great. So I guess we'll close out. It looks like that's it. Thank you again for coming and nice to be with you tonight.